Good evening. Thank you for having Darktrace, allowing us to join you. I wish I could, but thanks for letting me join virtually. Um, on behalf of myself and United Airlines and Mother Nature and reduced airflow through DC, I apologize. It's been a morning of delays and cancellations and stuff. So anyways, glad that we can meet at least virtually and I can share some thoughts with you. My name is John Allen. I lead our global field CISO team here at Darktrace. My team and I work with and speak with hundreds of CISOs and CIOs and security directors and customers from organizations of all sizes across all industries. Now, me personally, I have over 20 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity, in big data and AI. Now, Darktrace, which hopefully you're familiar with, is an AI cybersecurity company. We were founded out of Cambridge University over a decade ago, and we have a full platform of AI tools across virtually all coverage areas: network, OT, cloud, email, identity, you name it. And we provide not just detection and response capabilities, but proactive risk management and simulations and recovery capabilities. So hopefully you've had a chance to meet our team on site there, but if not, please stop by, say hello, ask them any questions you might have, or set up time to dive deeper into what Darktrace has to offer. I'm not going to cover a lot of the platform or much of it in my talk tonight. What I am going to cover is unlocking human AI collaboration, or securing the enterprise. At least that's the official title that they gave me. But if it's okay with you all, I'd actually like to substitute an alternate title. Unlocking human AI collaboration is a little too abstract for me, if you will. So what about how AI can help you and your team be more human? You see, I believe that in order for our organizations to achieve meaningful cyber resilience, they need a strong team of humans leading the way. Now, don't get me wrong, AI is a crucial component, but instead of focusing just on what AI delivers, I'd like to take it a step further to consider what AI enables you to do better. Now, if you're wondering, well, I don't know what I should do better, so I don't know where I should look to AI for help. Don't worry. I'm going to give you two examples in the form of coaches. Because after all, our titles might be security director, analyst, or CISO, but the value we provide our organizations is helping them manage their cybersecurity risk. And we can't do that alone. We're dependent on them to perform, so we're kind of like their cybersecurity coach. Now, let's look at what some coaches do and then explore how maybe AI can help you do those things better. These are both my own personal examples, but if they don't resonate with you, I'm sure you have your own that you can refer to. This first one is my daughter's T-ball coach. Now, this was a few years ago when she first started, and it was the first practice. So imagine it. You've got a bunch of 5-year-olds with their new mitts and bats. They're showing up and they immediately jumping in. I mean, yeah, it was their first time playing T-ball for most of them, but in their minds, they're ready for the major leagues. Now the coach, he's there, he springs into action, rounds them all up, and starts to teach them some of the basic. And he tailors it for each kid, depending on where they're at. So for some, he's showing them that, the mitt goes on this hand, not the other hand. For others, it's showing them how to actually hold the mitt, out in front, not down below, so the ball doesn't bounce up and hit them in the face. And then there's the group that's all about swinging bats. And so they're there, they grab the tees, put the ball on it, and they're swinging right at the balls. Thankfully, the coach was quick to intercept them and shows them that, nope, you swing the bats and try to hit the ball out to the field, not back towards the parents. So we appreciated that one. Thanks, Coach. At the end of the day, every kid went home with all of their teeth, they having learned something, gained a new skill, and they were excited for the next practice. Now, does that sound like, or those players sound like any of the stakeholders that you might have in your organization? Are they eagerly out there onboarding new SaaS vendors or finding new ways to use public LLMs in their business workflows? Do they have a great coach to advise them and help them safely explore those possibilities? At the same time, I acknowledge that not all coaches are great. So we should also consider, some of the things not to do. Now, this example is my surfing coach. And I know you're thinking, well, he doesn't look like he's a surfer. I'm not. That's why I needed a coach. Okay. So I'm at a popular surfing destination and I think, yeah, that looks like fun. So I go and I rent a board and get a coaching session. I meet my coach and, we head out into the ocean. I shouldn't go there yet. So in his defense, he did make me lie down on the board in the sand and practice or simulate catching a wave and hopping up. It wasn't great. It involved a lot of sand, some surf wax, and a huge rash all over my chest and my arms. So naturally, I was excited when we actually left the beach and got into the water. So there we are. We get in the water. We're out there where the waves are starting to form. My coach is floating on his board, and we see a wave coming in the distance, and it starts to form, and it's building up. And I look at my coach. I'm stoked. He gives me the hang loose, and I give it back to him, and then he nods at me and he yells, "Paddle, John, paddle harder, John, keep paddling." So I give it my all, and I'm paddling and I'm paddling, and first time I didn't catch the wave, so it goes on by me. That's okay. So we're out there and we keep waiting. I'm waiting for the next one. So just same as it was before. It happens. See the wave coming. I look at my coach and he nods and starts yelling, "Paddle, John, paddle harder, John, keep paddling." And again, I'm paddling, and I don't catch the wave. This continues for 45 minutes. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm literally paddling as hard as I can. And I have been doing this since my first attempt. If success hinged on merely me paddling harder, I would have been shredding it up by now. At the end of the day, my arms felt like they were going to fall off. My eyes were watering from the salt, and I was exhausted and burned out. Does that sound familiar? Maybe not the surfing part, but are we sometimes too rigid in the guidance that we provide to our stakeholders, even when it's clear what we're saying isn't really going to benefit them as much as it could be, Or how about even with ourselves and our teams? As our processes and tools continue to find more security alerts faster and faster, are we still addressing them in the same way? Just telling ourselves to paddle harder as they mount higher and higher. Now, I'm sharing all of this. Oops, my slide. There we go. I'm sharing all of this, because frankly, it can be kind of easy to make the case for AI and all the cool things that it can do. But I think we need to stay grounded in why those things are important. How can AI help you be a better human or coach for your organization? So that's the lens I want to take through which we're going to view the rest of this human AI collaboration. But before we look at some specific examples of how AI can help, we need to first unpack the term AI a little bit. Now, the first step is recognizing that there's a need for AI. And so your organization's digital footprint continues to expand and grow in complexity. Now, Gartner says that by 2026, 80% of companies are going to have AI embedded in their organization. And 35% of organizations are going to be creating their own custom AI. But guess what? I have some bad news for you. The attackers have already started using AI and machine learning. Over the past few years, with the introduction of generative AI, LLMs, we've seen a tremendous increase in new custom creation using generative AI of things like social engineering attacks and very sophisticated phishing attacks that now, of course, have excellent grammar and spelling and are harder to detect. So what does Darktrace do? Well, we use something called self-learning artificial intelligence. It's continuously learning how your employees use your data and systems and what processes they follow, and actually uses all of this information to help secure you, even when the world's changing so fast. But there's a lot of forms of AI. There's actually hundreds of different ML techniques. But don't worry, you don't need to know all of them. And in cybersecurity, you can actually start by breaking them down into three main approaches. There you go. The first one you're probably familiar with. It's called attacker-centric. It's pretty common, and well over 90% of the solutions in cybersecurity are using this machine learning and AI. What do I mean by attacker-centric? Well, it involves understanding known attacks that have already happened, where there always has to be a patient zero. And then that data gets uploaded to a data lake in the cloud, models are trained or reinforced, and then shared with various enterprises to see if your data exhibits any of those traits. It is a step forward from things like rules and signatures, but it's still predicated on the fact that somebody somewhere has seen this attack already, or that you're learning from the known techniques that attackers use. Now, the next method is a new one, which is much more around using open source generative AI and large language models. And this is what things like, let's say, Microsoft Security Copilot will use. And one of the advantages to this is you get access to data. In Microsoft's case, to over 70 trillion signals on various threats from around the world. And your security team, through a prompt interface, can ask all types of questions and get answers back. But similar to the first, if you think about what GPT stands for ChatGPT, it's a generative pre-trained transformer. So it's not learning in real time, and it's also not specific to your environment. But what if we want to know really quickly if another company in your industry is seeing this type of ransomware and what happened afterwards? Well, you can get some quick and hopefully accurate information. And then finally, the third column here is business-centric. Now, this is actually the approach that Darktrace uses. So this is using that self-learning unique to your environment. It's under your full control, which is a great thing for data privacy. And it's actually learning the patterns of life of the people, data, and devices. And it's using that to understand and isolate anomalies and can actually enforce normal patterns of business. So there's different approaches for leveraging AI in cybersecurity. And let's face it, every cybersecurity vendor is using some form of AI. You just have to. And your organizations probably already have some pretty large technology investments and partnerships. So I kind of need to address the elephant in the room. Or I guess the zebra and the ostrich, as it were. The question I'd be asking if I were your organization's CFO is, why would we need something else? Don't we already get that with our fill-in-the-blank license? Now, Darktrace was named Microsoft's Security Partner of the Year in the UK, which is where we're headquartered. So you can imagine we have a pretty strong position on this. And it's an important question for an organization's cybersecurity coaches to be able to answer. Now, if you'll indulge me, I like to use a zebra and an ostrich analogy here. Does anyone know what they have in common? Now, I'm understanding now that audience questions work a lot better if I'm in person there. So I'll just assume that someone in the audience said they're both black and white, which is actually true, but not terribly helpful or actually what I'm looking for. So the real answer is they both hang out together on the savannah and neither one of them wants to be eaten for dinner. So how does hanging out together help them avoid being attacked? Well, they have complementary senses. You see, the zebra has terrific eyesight and can see things moving around out there. Unfortunately, and you wouldn't guess this by the size of its nostrils, the zebra has a terrible sense of smell. So if it's not an attack that it can see far enough in advance, it probably doesn't have a chance of escaping. The ostrich, on the other hand, really bad eyesight, but an incredible sense of smell. So it focuses on picking up those scents that don't belong and uses that as its way of identifying an attack. So by working together, these two animals leverage their strengths and help each other for the common goal of not being attacked. And likewise, Microsoft, with its big data approach to cybersecurity, and Darktrace with our self-learning approach, work together to help our customers avoid suffering attacks. So we talked about wanting to use AI to help us be better cybersecurity coaches for our organizations. And we've reviewed the main categories of AI and why it can make a lot of sense to combine a unique self-learning approach with an industry big data behemoth like Microsoft. Now, these are some of the actual ML techniques that Darktrace uses. They're varied and they each have their strengths. The important thing to take away here is to ask questions internally and of your vendors to understand what machine learning methods their solutions use. Like anything else, you got to use the right tool for the right job, or you're going to end up making the situation a lot worse. Now get ready, cybersecurity coaches, because now we're going to review the top 3 human AI initiatives in cybersecurity. And this is how AI can help you and your teams be more human for your organizations. So the first one is the autonomous SOC. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as an AI SOC. This is about your security operations team upskilling and augmenting themselves. Now, we initially developed this use case as a research paper for Black Hat in 2017, which feels like a lifetime ago from an AI and machine learning perspective. What we decided to do is we had over 100 human threat analysts. Some of them were extremely skilled, and they may have worked in enterprise, some in financial services, some of them came from government organizations, but we also had recent college graduates, and we wanted to pair them together with Darktrace's machine learning AI. We wanted the machine learning to actually learn from the human threat analysts and actually see if we can get it to the point where the machine learning algorithms could be as good as a human at investigating a new threat. We were able to achieve this, but I'll tell you, it took us 3 years. 3 years of training on the human analysts to get what we call the cyber AI analyst, to be at the stage of performing equal to or better than the human threat analysts. So what's interesting is now you take that and you have the ability for AI to investigate 100% of every threat that is specific to your enterprise. And by the way, this saves about 92% of the time it used to take humans. And it can actually present this information in such a way that it tells you what the threat was, what the hypothesis was, what data was looked at, and whether an action was taken or not. So it can be very, very helpful. And the SOC professionals aren't having to just paddle harder and harder through mountains of alerts. And instead, they're enabled in real time with pertinent information to which they can add appropriate business context to go out and actually engage more meaningfully with their stakeholders. Next up is CTEM, or Continuous Threat Exposure Management. For some of you, it might not be a surprise, but the average enterprise has been reporting over 250,000 vulnerabilities across their IT staff. Their IT stack. It's not just practical to think that you can patch and update all of these systems. What is important is that you find and prioritize the most important ones, and you start shifting from being reactive to being proactive in your security team. So one of the ways that AI can help you do this is through attack path discovery. Now, no two companies are the same, and what that means is that your crown jewels are different. Your crown jewels are different from the crown jewels of the person sitting next to you in their organization. And now this took us 18 months to develop and perfect an algorithm to identify the unique crown jewels in every business, and then have the AI actually attack those crown jewels from all different angles. Not surprisingly, we found that AI determined that the human was the weakest link in every single one of these attack paths. So then we can actually simulate that attack against the humans and see what they do. We can send them a perfectly bespoke and curated phishing email, and we can monitor, and the AI can see, did they open the email? Did they click the link? Did they provide their credentials? In each one of those steps, the AI will use to adjust the risk score and the corresponding risk of the entire associated attack path. And what that will allow your team to do, and the coaches to do, is prioritize the vulnerabilities to understand which ones do they actually need to address today. It might not be the most critical asset, but if that asset is on an attack path that's just a couple hops away from a crown jewel, you might need to patch a vulnerability that's only, a CVE of 5 there, but postpone the 9.8 CVEs if they're on less important assets, your lunch menu or an external facing, calendar or agenda, things like that. I do have a quick real world use case on this. It was with an hospital that we were working with outside the Chicago area. And the CIO came to us and said that he just didn't feel like the security team was aligning with the doctors and the nurses in the hospital to actually focus on improving the patient outcomes. So the first thing he did was to use what we just talked about, the cyber AI analyst. And with that, he was able to have the AI investigate 100% of the threats and only surface those that were really important for his security team. And that freed up his team to go out and actually talk to the nurses and the doctors. And there was one particular group within the hospital. It was the neonatal care unit. And they had some new IoT devices coming in to the hospital. And they wanted to run this attack path modeling on it and use AI to see what risks might exist. So we were able to not only identify those risks, but more importantly, actually create what we call an AI safety blanket around those assets to toughen them and harden them to make it more difficult for any attacks. So now the security team is freed up from the mundane and actually out there and working and engaging with their stakeholders for the common goal of improved patient outcomes. The next area I'd like to cover is incident readiness and recovery. There's no industry acronym yet for this. We call it IRR. And the reason there's no acronym yet or magic quadrant is it's really kind of breaking research area for us. What does incident readiness and recovery do? Well, I know everyone in this room remembers the CrowdStrike incident, and everything then became about readiness and recovery and how fast can you come back online. This area helps prepare your team in case of a real-world incident, whether being attacked or otherwise, to make sure that people are ready and prepared. The way this works is you can actually run a variety of different AI incident simulations. Now, these are actual real-world attacks that have happened on somebody else, and you can run them in your own environment with guardrails wrapped around them, so it's very safe. And you can actually have your security team and your IT team hands on keyboards during the simulation. And what will happen is the AI will say, this is where the attack is likely to go next. You should do this. Your human team can take that under consideration and decide whether or not they want to listen to the AI, take that next action, or if they feel that they know better and have better contextual relevance, so they want to ignore the AI's recommendation. At the end of this, you get a very detailed report from start to finish of the entire incident and how it played out and how well your team responded. Real world example of this is actually a credit union. So they're a SaaS provider, actually, to credit unions. They're based on the West Coast, and we met with their CIO, and the CIO said every year they have to run a tabletop exercise, and they have to share these results of the tabletop exercise with their credit union customers and with their cyber insurance company and with the regulators. And he says it goes very well. They pass with flying colors every year. It's fine. Then they reset the tabletop exercise and run it again. It's, you put up the flashcards for the executives and you have them come in a room and try and make the decisions around a certain scenario. Hopefully it's a well-crafted scenario. But he said, at the end, it really doesn't make any sense, because when you're in the middle of an incident and you're trying to bring systems back online, the people who matter most are the people with hands on keyboards, working together with the executives to understand the risk and the trade-off. But not having the security team and the IT team as part of that exercise didn't make any sense. And he said after 3 years of doing this, it still didn't feel like the team was any better prepared, and asked us, how can AI help? So we actually had his team trial the IRR tool, and they ran a simulation. And they still ran it a bit like a tabletop, but now he had his security teams and his IT teams with hands on keyboards, but he also brought his executives who participated in the original tabletops into the same room. And they went through and they picked an AI ransomware simulation, ran through the entire exercise, and the AI documented everything. Again, they still passed with flying colors, but at the end, he said now, he feels like they're actually really ready. And more importantly, instead of just running it this one time, once or twice a year, he's running them monthly. And he said he's getting to the point where he might even start running a simulation every week. That means his team's going to start to develop muscle memory. And when a real incident occurs, they're going to be ready. So I think this is a fascinating example of how AI can help make sure your teams are ready with hands on keyboard and in line with the business executives as well. This is a far cry from, me flopping on the sand and then going in the water thinking I'm going to, paddle harder and pop up on top of a board. So what's next for cybersecurity? Here are just a few things that you might want to look out for in terms of cybersecurity and where AI might be able to help. Data first security. Now, this isn't anything new, and we're all familiar with various, sensitive data types, whether it's PII or PHI, and the various, regulatory requirements and frameworks you need to abide by. But as we said in the beginning, organizations bringing AI into their business processes and developing their own AI. Is that AI data, that training data, does that need to be a sensitive data type? Do we need to put additional safety measures around that? And how can AI be used to help protect itself in that sense? The other thing to watch out for is embedded cybersecurity. Now, we've been through an evolution over the years where we started with, first it was just log aggregation, and then we got the SIMs, where you put security processes on top of the log aggregators. And now we're getting into next-gen SIMs and other acronyms that you throw on top of that. Aren't we getting to the point where pulling all of our logs together in one place and then running rules against it causes too much of a delay and too much lag? And by the time you would have been able to find that, the damage is already done. Our stakeholders aren't going to be happy with the answer that we continuously find out in the post-mortem of incidents that, yeah, we did see that alert, that log file got pushed to the SIM, and when we look, we can find it. That's not going to fly. So we're going to need to look to see how can we push AI and cybersecurity closer to the context in which they're monitoring and get closer to that embedded cybersecurity piece. And the last one, and gosh, I hope we make some strides here because frankly, I think it's overdue, is bridging that gap between cybersecurity and business strategy. We talked again, I'll go back to the organizations building their own AI tools. A lot of them are doing it and even looking into what we're calling agentic AI and saying, how can I have different AI agents performing business processes within my organizations? And as we as security professionals build up our own AI agents, the cyber AI analyst or others, how can they start to talk to each other and get that business context immediately and understand this business unit is on, a high revenue cycle. This is their Black Friday. I've got a different risk appetite for taking down systems to patch vulnerabilities or for even, taking out small threats. I need to keep it up and running versus another cycle, another business unit that might be on a down cycle that, okay, we're at off hours or we're at non-peak time. It's okay to do some lower hanging things. Hopefully this is another area in 2025 that we see being brought forward and making progress in. So I appreciate you indulging me virtually. I hope that was helpful in taking the view of not just AI and humans and all the cool things AI can do, but really pulling it home into what can AI help us do personally as we are those cybersecurity coaches for our organization to help them get out there and embrace the new technologies, but do it in a safe way, in a constructive way, so that they go home with all their teeth, so that they're safe, so that they're not, hitting our protected data out into the public domain, and that our teams aren't overburdened. And we're not just simply asking them, paddle harder, work through all of these alerts, just do it faster. And we actually empower them and give them the skills and the ability to practice things and get better and offload some of those more manual tasks to the AI so that the humans can actually engage at a more meaningful level. So again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you allowing me to join virtually and the Darktrace team there to join in person to your meeting. Hopefully you guys have had some great conversations in person. If not, stop by and grab them before you leave today. I'm happy to entertain questions if there's a mic in the room or if you guys want to try and facilitate that. I'll hang out and you can let me know.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand at the mic in case somebody asks a question and you can't hear it. But that's the value that I bring, which is pretty fantastic. I think I don't know if I'm the ostrich or the zebra in that, John, but
I don't know.
make it work. All right. Any questions for John from the room? Yeah.
What exactly are you doing to make sure that component isn't compromised itself if there is an attack that's launched directing towards your product?
Could you hear that?
I could not.
Okay. As far as the AI itself, what are we doing if there is an attack launched at our product to make sure our AI and our product is not compromised? Is that?
Yes.
Yes. I was just called sir. Fantastic.
That is a great question, and I appreciate that, and every vendor should be asked that. For us personally, we are actually on the forefront of adopting AI, the latest AI risk framework, which is so again, we're UK based, so we tend to favor the international standards. In the US, we did have the NIST AI risk management framework, although I heard tomorrow the director of NIST's AI Safety Institute will be stepping down. But anyways, in the UK, there's the ISO 42001 standard, which is how do you develop and manage the risk around AI risk management system, I think is what it's called. So we're putting those controls in place and getting those certified to reach that. So, and under the covers, it goes into the actual folks that have access to the models, making sure they understand the risk that those models, the risk involved in those models and the data that feeds into those models. Our approach, and if you didn't catch it, is a little, I guess we avoid some of the risks there because we're not the zebra, I guess, is the one that we're not doing the big data approach. We don't have trained AI on large bodies of data where they could be susceptible to data poisoning. Our self-learning AI really just feeds off our customers' data, but we still have to protect the models, and we're going through those controls and getting that certification. So great question.
All right. Yep. One more.
Your self-learning AI, is that housed at the customer on their equipment, or are you guys hosting it in the cloud?
It is hosted on the customer site. I'm going to repeat the question to John so that my 3 months of expertise or not. The question was, our AI models, is that hosted on the customer site, or are we putting that in the cloud?
Nope. Another great question. Again, data privacy, control of your data, all of that. You should be asking that to every vendor. And I'm going to give you, unfortunately, I'll give you the consultant answer because as our products have evolved, the answer is now, it depends. The original answer in the majority the answer in the majority of cases is no. The learning and the data resides with you on premise. We don't want it. As a risk practitioner, I don't want to see it. I don't want to enter into any agreements or take on any risk, so it stays there. We give you the actual AI models. They start out blank, if you will, without any learning. You need to give them usually a month to let them identify those patterns and build that up, and then it starts to have a pretty good efficacy on identifying the anomalies. Now, again, I said it depends. There are some situations and some where we will be hosting the solution in the cloud. And so, technically it's not on-prem with you, but it's not on-prem with us, but it's in a shared cloud hosted environment. So things like email and obviously our cloud offering itself is hosted there and happens in the cloud. The identity portion, though, is again, that's on-prem at your organization because it's just pulling down the information from your own tenants down into your environment. So again, great questions, but that's actually what's enabled us to be deployed in the U.S. Federal, in the Department of Defense, at several sites where we send them, the AI, and we don't ever want to get it back with the data.
One more.
What if the attacker or attackers are already resident?
What if the attacker or the attackers are already resident? You mean like inside the customer environment?
And you start learning, and it's not really an anomaly at that point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is good.
Yes. Yep. Great. I like it. This is good. You guys are thinking through this. So yes, another pitfall and wait, that just doesn't add up what you said. So we'll peel the onion a little bit and go into the AI. It's not just what's normal for one individual device. It builds up multiple patterns of normal. And so you can think of it as an onion, but it's really kind of clusters that exist within an organization. So it's going to look at what's normal for the organization as a whole. and then it's going to look at what's normal for Carter, and then it's going to put Carter into multiple other peer groups to say, okay, Carter acts a lot like, a person on Eastern time zone that does marketing events, that's maybe a newish to the organization, and he gets put into all of these statistical clusters just automatically. And then that's how it identifies what's abnormal, is if you stick out of those groups as well. And so, as you might imagine, even if someone, comes into the say you're a Darktrace customer, you have the self-learning AI set up, you've been on it for 2 years, you have a new hire join the organization. Why isn't it flooding the security team with, all the weird things that the new hire is doing for the first time? Because it can very quickly put that new hire, their identity, their device, their asset into multiple different clustered peer groups and say, nope, you're acting in line with how those others act. So that's how it happens. If you already have the attacker, or the malicious insider internally doing things, as we build those models, they're still going to stand out. Now the outlier to this, or the exception, would be if you hire only a bunch of malicious attackers and they develop their own cluster, and that's normal behavior for them. And in that case, we probably don't want you as a customer. So I think we're both good.
All right, we got another from the back.
Following up on that, inputs with models, what data sources are you using for that training?
Yeah, what inputs for the models, what data sources are we using for the training?
Yep. Another great question. Again, it depends. It depends on the context. And so it's, what coverage area, I guess, are we deployed in? So if it's network, we're trying to get that raw network traffic and feed it through, and we're using the flow data from that. Or I'm sorry, we're processing the raw network traffic and pulling out the metadata from it and using that as our signals. And so it's, I don't know the exact number or what they are, but it's the IP address, it's the port, it's the time of day, it's the amount of data, it's the protocol that's used, all sorts of data pieces out of that. If we're doing email is the gold mine for AI. I mean, it's literally reading the AI and it's reading the email text, doing processing of it. It's able to determine, is this email trying to incite someone? Is it trying to do an impersonation? And it's, again, but it's also looking at who normally communicates. Is this a normal person that you communicate with, or someone else in the organization communicates with? Do you normally send attachments of this time? Do you reference it as an attachment, but the attachment is actually a different kind of attachment? So that's using all kinds of things in email. If you're looking at cloud's very much like network, obviously, except it's on someone else's iron. But again, it's looking at the different assets that are being spun up and spun down, so you can the traffic patterns between those. If you're doing identities, it's looking at which directories do you normally go to and visit? How much data do you move down? What times of day or days of the week do you usually interface with these assets? So there's a whole slew of different kind of pieces of metadata that we pull out of the different data from all those different coverage areas. And again, the neat part is, while I kind of explained all of those in isolation, under the covers, it's the same AI engine. And so while Darktrace is, best in class for email or for network, you put it together and that AI feeds off of each other. So it's able to associate that there was a slightly odd email that came into John's mailbox. We flagged it as such, but it went through. And then correlate that with John's identity did something a little bit odd in SharePoint. And then now John's device is uploading a slightly unusual amount of data to a third-party IP that we haven't seen before. All of those will show up as alerts. That AI analyst, your people aren't trying to paddle through all of that. The AI analyst picks each of those alerts up, researches it, and can combine them together in a Darktrace incident and say, here's what happens. Here's what happened. Looked like John got had, and data exfiltration was the goal. Hopefully it stopped it along the way as well.
All right, now the questions are loading up there. I think it's because of the translator. I think they're really loving that over here in the maroon.
Data flow limitations or like space limitations of the AI?
Are there any data flow or space limitations with the AI?
There, yes and no. There's different sizes. So if you think of the data flow in terms of, say take on-prem for network, we have different sized appliances. So depending on the particular amount of traffic going through a particular switch, that will determine what size appliance we need to put in there. I don't have the actual specs of what we can support, but I'll tell you, we have, global organizations with, multiple locations around pumping large amounts of data through our network appliances and don't have an issue there. On the cloud side as well, we're able to pull that data down. The other interesting piece too is it's a bit of a tiered architecture. So you'll have sort of the master machine learning piece, but then you have other sensors and probes out there where they will collect the data raw, do a bit of pre-processing, and then only feed back the actual metadata pieces that are needed for the AI.
Loving it.
Sure.
All right, tan shirt.
How do you deal with the time windows for the various actions that might be suspicious? Daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual? Sometimes people do things only once every 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's normal. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I'll let John answer it. Even though we wear the same jacket, he's really better at answering the question. The question was, how do we deal with sort of the different times that people's actions might happen? Like if they do something only once every 6 months, how are we learning and incorporating that?
Yep. No, that's another great question. Now, the learning over time. So, and again, maybe this was, I guess I'll continue the last question as I answer this question. So the bandwidth of the data, we haven't really hit any limits like that. That's huge. The retention of the data, we don't do. We're not a SIM. I've had my own internal battles of whether that's an easy checkbox we ought to start doing. The reality is, if you need to archive data, there's a lot cheaper ways to do it than a SIM. Our core differentiator is that real-time AI, and so we process all the data. We don't hang on to it. You can get PCAPs out of the tool for usually about the last week. You can get in and still see the traffic and stuff for usually the last 6 months. Give or take, but it's not retaining the data. It is retaining the learning. And so to your point, once you start, if you have these seasonal things, when we see it, usually the first time, it will be anomalous. And now, is it malicious? And, how much does it stick out? And, are we shutting things off? That depends on what's actually done and what's anomalous. If it's something like, for our quarterly reporting, we now have, a bunch of folks in the finance team that are working, long hours overnight and going out to, whatever sites to help generate reports and things. That looks anomalous. It might alert on that the first time. And then usually the second time it happens, it's like, well, this is not, a 0% anomaly for me anymore. I've seen it before. That really drops it down. And so it usually will then flatten out over time. So, but you're right. The first time it sees something new, that is an anomaly. Depending on the context, it may or may not alert with a high severity on it.
More?
Say a customer wants it offline, separate. How do you provide maintenance? Say the product is down. I'm assuming you do software updates.
Yeah. Yeah, John can talk about that. John, the question is, what about updates and maintenance? If the customers obviously are offline, they want it offline, but how do we do things like software updates or product maintenance?
Yep. Nope. Another great question. And there's a whole mix of customers that we have from private companies, small private companies, to large public companies, to government organizations in sensitive industries, obviously government, to not as sensitive. And it's flexible. So I'd say The easiest for us is, we put the solution in place and we enable what's called call home. And it uses kind of secure tunneling to come back to Darktrace and pull down updates. And you can set it to automatically update, or you can, just like anything else, you can set it to, alert me when there's an update, but I'm going to have to trigger it and accept it. And so you can go through that way. Customers that don't want to allow the call home feature can disable that, and then we'll help them. And typically that's done then, they'll still get an alert through our customer portal and through their customer success manager that a new release or a new update is out. They'll just have to go in and initiate it themselves to do the download and the update. There are some devices as well that might be on ships that don't have immediate access, or in controlled different types of power plant situations and things like that are completely offline. And those obviously have a much more bespoke process to updating them. That usually involves our cyber technicians being involved with the customer. Typically follows whatever process they have in place for a lot of their other devices. And it's typically disconnecting it a little bit from that operational side and pulling it out, performing the update and test, and then putting it back into place. That's the exception. I mean, those are the very controlled places. But yeah,
That he can't really talk about.
yes.
Any more? It's been really good. Great question. One more. People are loving it. No, why are you sorry?
During mentioned about the CTEM, it determines the most damaging and most likely attack. How do you determine most damaging?
Yeah, that's really good. It's about the CTEM, John. How do we, when it's discovering the attack paths, and it said it can discover the most damaging, how do we determine what is the most damaging?
Yep, that's a great question. So that was the piece where, again, it took us, I forget what the timeline was on this. I think this was 18 months to come up with the algorithm that can, I don't necessarily like the term, but it's the quote crown jewels of the organization. And the caveat to that is it's what the AI thinks are the crown jewels. Every customer will go in and look at it and say, yeah, and provide the business context to it. But what it does is it looks at, the traffic patterns within the organization. So who's connecting to what, and it is also looking at the firewall rules to say which devices can talk to which devices, which data is going in, which data is coming out. It will integrate with, whatever Active Directory system you have to see who has permissions to what. All of that comes into place. And then the AI says, okay, here are your most valuable assets. And it has a 4-part basic risk score that it assigns to each of the assets. And I'll see if I can remember it, but it's the impact score, which those are your crown jewels. If those got taken out, they're going to cause the most impact. It's the exposure score. So how likely is it that an attack could reach this particular asset? It's the weakness, the weakness score, which is kind of, how likely is it that the asset could withstand the attack if it reached it? And then it's the overall, I think then they combine it, I believe, into the overall 4th, which is that combined risk score. So what it does, it finds the crown jewels, and then it builds out from there, basically just saying what could talk to what, and then based on which of those assets have those higher risk scores, maps it out and says, okay, here's what it thinks are your most important assets. Here's the most likely attack path that would be traversed in order to impact those. And like I said, at the beginning of all of those attack paths is a human, or maybe a couple humans, actually. It can be, Carter and I have a trusted relationship. Carter doesn't have access to anything yet because he's too new yet, but I do. So your best access is to compromise Carter, and then you can compromise me easily by breaching my trust. And then you start to get to more important assets. I don't really have access to important assets, so it'd be a fool's errand, but you wouldn't know that. But that's a little bit of kind of how the AI pieces it together for you. And it presents really cool graphs where you can see kind of the nodes. For the humans, it does do that testing. So that's that. And again, that one's actually using generative AI for those spear phishing emails. And they're good. we actually had to implement a feature where you could kind of dumb them down because they were so good that you'd fall for them every time, which I think is appropriate because that's what it looks like when you have business email compromise or you have a sophisticated attacker really spearphishing, one of your important assets. So your target or your person they're going to open the email. They're probably going to click on the link. I hope they don't provide their credentials. But if they do, and depending on, which level it goes through, like I said, that impacts the rest of the attack path to say, okay, how likely am I to be able to then get to the next step? And then the actual kind of technologies, nodes or assets on the attack path, the servers, it uses more statistical models to say, okay, this particular server is running, Windows, whatever. It was patched last, 2 months ago. Pretty sure the likelihood of, or I have a known vulnerability on it. So the likelihood of it being breached, if I'm able to reach it, is, 85%. And then it just kind of builds up that statistical chain as it goes along to tell you what's the most likely path.
John was being modest. Obviously, he and I are both crown jewels, so any AI would tell that. All right, we're going to call it there. I want to, John, thank you for showing up. Thank you for getting to the airport and
Yes.
then not going anywhere. That was a critical path.
Yeah.
But I want to thank the audience for being here. It's been super fun. Loved all of the questions. We are still out at the Darktrace table, so feel free to come by. We've got some coffee cups, and if you don't take them, Matt's going to have to drive home with them. So he would appreciate if you take those and the baseball hats. I mean, he only has one head, so he can't wear that many hats. And we really actually look forward to conversing and connecting with all of you. So thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.